I filled 3 glasses to the same line and did not touch a drop until I read every word on the can first. Coca Cola, Pepsi, RC Cola. 3 companies, 3 separate factories, 3 different decades of history behind them, and every single one of them put the same acid near the top of the ingredient list. Where I grew up, we tested a jar by asking one question. Could you say plainly what was inside it? That question is going to follow us through all 3 of these cans tonight, and by the end, I am going to show you what is physically left behind when the water and the fizz are gone, which is not nothing. Do you check the ingredient line before you drink, or do you trust the picture on the front of the can? Type it below. One word is enough, front or back. Start with the acid. Phosphoric acid sits on the label of Coca Cola, Pepsi, and RC Cola, right after the sugar and the caramel colour. And its job has nothing to do with flavour for its own sake. It is there to cut the sweetness, to take syrup that would otherwise taste like straight sugar water and give it that sharp, tangy snap on the back of the tongue. That is the fact. The plain conclusion is that without it, none of these 3 drinks would taste like themselves at all. The tang is manufactured, not incidental. My judgment is not that anyone hid this. It is printed right on the can. But I have met very few people who could tell you why it is there. And a label you cannot explain is still a label you are choosing to trust blind. My grandmother kept a rule for the cellar. If she could not say what was in it, it did not go on the shelf. She was not thinking about phosphoric acid when she made that rule. She was thinking about a batch of pickling brine a neighbour brought over one September that had a chemical sharpness she couldn't place, and she poured the whole crock out behind the barn rather than let it sit next to her jars. She never explained her reasoning past that. She just said if she couldn't name it, it didn't belong. I have thought about that crock more than once standing in a soda aisle. Now here is where the acid gets more interesting than a taste note. Chemists who have tested carbonated colas found the pH sitting between roughly 2.5 and 4. Acidic enough that you are putting citrus in itself is not a verdict. It is one piece of the picture, and I am not going to pretend fair about because more trust than a one-sided one ever will. All three of these companies list every one of these ingredients openly, in plain English, on packaging anyone can pick up in a store and read before they ever pay for it. Nothing here is hidden in fine print or buried behind a code only a chemist could translate. The honest limit to tonight's whole argument is availability of information, not concealment. This was never a secret formula story. It is a story about whether people are reading what has been sitting in front of them the entire time, at every checkout counter, for generations. It's also worth saying plainly that these three brands did not arrive at the same moment, or from the same table. RC Cola traces back to a pharmacist working in Columbus, Georgia, in 1905. Pepsi traces back to a pharmacist in New Bern, North Carolina, a few years earlier still, mixing what he first called Brad's drink before renaming it. Each one started as a small, local, hand-mixed product, long before it became a can on a shelf 100 countries wide. That history doesn't excuse or condemn anything on the label today. It just means the size of the company has changed far more than the basic chemistry inside the can has. I promised you I'd boil one down, so let's finish that. Take the water and the carbonation out of any of these three sodas by simple evaporation, and what is left behind is not mysterious. It is concentrated sugar and caramel colour, thick, dark, and sticky. Essentially the syrup base the whole drink was built from before the water and fizz were ever added back in. That is the fact. The conclusion is plain. The fizz and the cold are doing a lot of the work of making that much sugar go down easy. And once you remove them, the sugar is impossible to ignore or explain away. My judgment. This isn't toxic residue or some hidden poison rising to the surface once the water is gone. It is simply the truth of the recipe with the disguise removed. And the disguise was doing more work than most of us ever gave it credit for. I think about the first Sunday dinner I ever had outside of the community. Sitting at a table where the only drink offered was cola straight from a 2-litre bottle, no water pitcher anywhere in sight. And how strange it felt that the sweetest thing at the table was also the thing nobody at that table thought twice about pouring for a child. That wasn't cruelty. It was just how ordinary the can had become to everyone but me. So here is where the three land, side by side, plainly, once everything is on the table. RC Cola carries the most caffeine and close to the most sugar of the three, and gets talked about the least. That mismatch alone is worth remembering the next time it's the safe-looking can sitting in the cooler at a gas station. Pepsi sits just under it on both counts, sweeter than Coke by most comparisons, and carrying a touch more caffeine as well. Coca Cola carries the least sugar and the least caffeine of the three, though least is still 39 grams in a single can, nothing worth waving off as harmless just because it isn't the highest number on the shelf. None of the three should be mistaken for a neutral drink. None of them are secretly poison either, whatever a dramatic headline might want you to believe. They are exactly what their own labels already say they are, if you take the time to read past the picture on the front of the can. The principle underneath all of this is the same one my grandmother kept for her cellar. Not fear of any single ingredient, and not a blanket verdict against sugar or fizz or a can on a hot afternoon. Just the plain habit of being able to say what's in front of you before you decide to let it in. She didn't need a laboratory to keep that rule. She needed patience and a willingness to pour something out rather than trust it by default because everyone else on the road was drinking the same thing without a second look. Go check whichever can is closest to you right now and tell me the first ingredient listed after water. One word is all I'm asking for. I'll be reading every answer. We opened with 2 questions I promised to answer. What's actually behind that tangy edge on your tongue? Phosphoric acid, printed plainly, doing exactly what I told you it does. And what's really left once the water is gone? Not a mystery, and not sludge either. Just sugar. Finally honest about what it always was underneath the fizz. I'll keep reading the back of the can before the front. That has never once let me down.